Very good. So I'm going to show the extent of what I know in Spanish with Buenos dias. That's about as good as I've got. I do have yes with C and no. Beyond that, don't know a lot of Spanish. So I'm very appreciative of one, the invitation to present to you today, and two, of our simultaneous translation. So to Xavi, thank you, and to our translator, thank you, and much appreciated. So with that, I was asked to talk about overseeding, and not sure how much overseeding is done in Spain, but there is some overseeding that's been done in the U.S. and it, depending on the season and the year, it has increased and decreased in popularity with it. But we will talk about it today and some things, some new techniques that are coming up. First, I want to clear up a little bit of terminology and on it. So this may be just a little boring, but at least we're on the same page, talking about what we're talking about here. Very good English, Clint, on it. So overseeding, definition is seeding a cool season species into a permanent warm season turf grass for the purpose of winter color, abatement of wear and tear, and playability on it. So our warm season grass would be Bermuda grass. Cool season examples that we would overseed with might be annual ryegrass, perennial ryegrass, poatriv, on those. And we'll go into much more detail. But again, just wanting to get a little bit of terminology. And sometimes that is misidentified with interseeding. So some of you that may have cool season grasses, let's say, for example, Kentucky bluegrass on your golf course, or maybe more northern areas or higher elevation areas where you may have something other like fine fescue. Interseeding would be the practice of seeding a cool season species into an existing stand of the same species for the purpose of improving stand density or introducing a more hardy cultivar, like drought resistance or disease resistance or something along those lines. So if you were seeding Kentucky bluegrass into Kentucky bluegrass, or fine fescue into fine fescue, that would be an example of interseeding. And you're trying to improve the stand density of your permanent cool season species on it. So excuse me, I'm trying to run both sides here where actually see the my English as version where Xavi translated it from English to Spanish for it. So overseeding, let's make no mistake, overseeding weakens the permanent turf and will delay its green up and growth in the spring. So if you don't have to overseed, generally I recommend that you don't. If you can avoid it, do so. Avoid overseeding if at all possible. But with the pressures on many golf courses, it is a marketed product, and overseeding can be quite stunning, quite attractive, and it does have some benefits that sometimes you can very much appreciate. So, but if you don't have to do it, and we'll get into greater depth as to where that competition comes from and how overseeding weakens Bermuda grass health and the impacts it can have. If you don't have to overseed, certainly try to avoid it. Or if you can come up with a plan where you may overseed 2 or 3 consecutive years and then give the grass, the Bermuda grass, a year of recovery of not overseeding, allowing it to rejuvenate itself and recover and improve Bermuda grass health. Because in the cases where we overseed, your grass that you're playing off of is Bermuda grass. That's your permanent grass, that's your desirable grass, and you don't want to do anything to reduce the health of that desirable grass. The other is you lose some opportunity for weed control. Dormant Bermuda grass, in the case, I'm assuming in Spain, that Bermuda grass will go dormant in the winter time of the year, so it will go off color and it will go dormant. Certainly happens for us here in the southern part of the United States. When it's dormant, we have the ability to control some of our winter annual weeds. So, for example, annual bluegrass or Poa annua, we have opportunity to control those weeds in dormant turf. Whereas in overseeded situations, if that Poa comes along, in that ryegrass, you'll get the white seed heads will disrupt the overall uniformity and appearance of the overseeding, and selective control of taking the Poa out of out of the ryegrass post-emergently is difficult, and we have fewer options pre-emergent as well. The old product Rubigan used to be one that we would use. It was a fungicide that had herbicidal type activity. And in a certain program, you could use Rubigan as a pre-emergent suppressive of annual bluegrass in overseeded situations. But with that product no longer being available, we've lost some effective pre-emergent options to control annual bluegrass in overseeded situations. So overseeding certainly makes it difficult to control some weeds. Likewise, nematodes. Whenever you go out and overseed, you are providing a nice food source. Nematodes will eat those roots of the ryegrass just as well as they will for the Bermuda grass. So you're providing a continual food source for those nematodes. Although soil temperatures, as they cool and are more favorable for the cool season species, the nematodes won't be as active. But mid to late fall or even early spring, you've got a really nice food source and allowing them to increase in population as that warm season grass comes along. So doing some things to help reduce nematodes or some cultural practices to mitigate nematode damage, overseeding does not aid with that. So overseeding, some benefits. It can help with turfgrass health. It can help reduce wear and tear and have fewer bare spots out there. So it does have some advantages and some benefits. If you're looking at a sports field, for example, and I give this presentation not only for golf courses, but also for sports fields, athletic fields like soccer in Europe, or I guess football in Europe. It does help with playability. In golf, it certainly is one of those things that provides a marketing tool. Overseeding improves aesthetics, it improves appearance, and kind of gives what we refer to sometimes as that wow factor. A well striped up, overseeded golf course certainly winds up helping bring people in to play and increase revenue and cash flow and that kind of thing. It can wind up, there's some research has shown that it can help with turfgrass protection and mitigate loss of stolons, and that's basically a matter of serving as a buffer between wear. So cart wear, foot wear, that type of thing, is that grass can add as a buffer between stolons of the rhizome, stolons of the Bermuda grass, and help mitigate some wear. Of course, there's some break-even points where if you overseed too heavy, then you lose that real benefit there. So it does have some benefits. It does have some positives. It's not all negative out there, but sometimes you just kind of got to consider what those are. Species to overseed. I've mentioned Bermuda grass. And Bermuda grass having these below ground rhizomes. I'm assuming you can see my arrow here on the screen. But the below ground rhizomes allow that grass to recover and grow. And when it comes to looking at Bermuda grass and other species that I think are conducive for overseeding, having a below ground rhizome makes a tremendous difference. And Bermuda grass certainly does that. Other grasses that do as well are zoysia grass and seashore paspalum. I have on there not to overseed centipede grass or St. Augustine grass. Both of those species are purely stoloniferous. There are no below ground rhizomes on those, and the competition in the spring during transition to go from active growth of the cool season species to active growth of the warm season species is an advantage to the cool season species in the spring when the grass is trying to green up, and centipede and St. Augustine grass, centipede grass and St. Augustine grass can and will suffer. I have on there not to overseed zoysia grass, and the rationale behind that is that zoysia grass is such a tight canopy density, and the site prep, and we'll get into this in greater detail, to get zoysia grass opened up such that you get good soil to seed contact is very difficult. And many times I've seen zoysia grass overseeded. It's very sporadic. It looks patchy. It doesn't have a uniform look to it, and it just getting zoysia grass to seed uniformly and look good and have that appearance that you're after and putting the money and expense of buying seed and planning on doing the mowing and everything else. Zoysia grass just historically has not performed particularly well on that one. So in general, I would say avoid overseeding zoysia grass. Um, yeah, a dormant zoysia grass is fairly attractive. Zoysia grass has an attractive appearance as a dormant grass, especially if it's weed free. So a weed free dormant zoysia grass can look very attractive, and try to avoid that overseeding, because more often than not, that's just going to uh, not suit. Seashore paspalum, I'm aware that there is some paspalum being used in Spain as well as in other parts of Europe. I have traveled to this area a couple of times, and I've seen some of these species there. Paspalum is one that potentially can be overseeded. It has some challenges with that one, particularly in the transition portion in the fall, or excuse me, in the spring. Where we can use some herbicides with Bermuda grass to help transition that ryegrass out, relieve the competition, skew it back towards the Bermuda grass. Some of those herbicides are injurious to the paspalum, so natural transition is more of a case with paspalum, and can be a little bit more challenging. Getting rid of the ryegrass in the spring of the year, as well as that competition, can be enough to really stunt the paspalum and cause it a delayed timing in green up, as well as recovery and getting your golf course back to looking good and playing like it should. Areas that we see here in the States being overseeded, home lawns sometimes, and we're seeing that increase in popularity as the economy seems to improve. Sports fields, so for our football, soccer, lacrosse, baseball, are areas that we see overseeding occur. And on golf courses, less so on greens nowadays. That tends to be painted, although there are still some golf courses out there that have the old 328 or TIFF green Bermuda grass on them, or even a 320, the TIFF dwarf, that periodically get overseeded on those. More often than not, we see tees, fairways, and greens approaches. We are seeing some fairways beginning to be overseeded again, and then there are certain golf courses that overseed every year for particularly TV purposes. Those that are on TV in the spring of the year can sometimes be overseeded to give that green color as the golf season begins in the spring of the year, and have that look and appearance on television. So on golf courses, just about, I can't say that, with one exception, and it's a very notable exception, the Augusta National, where the Masters is held. They may overseed their first cut, and others may refer to it as a fair or as a rough area, but most don't overseed the roughs out there. Some considerations when overseeding. Let me get my slides moved up over here, my English version on those. Seeding timing. When can you do it? For here in the States, we tend to see it between mid-September and mid-October. So right now, it being the end of October, we're almost outside the range of normal overseeding, although soil temperatures dictate much of that, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes a little bit more. We've been warm this year, so we're still right in what we might refer to as the sweet spot for overseeding. Soil temperatures are very conducive for putting seed down and getting rapid germination and take of that ryegrass. So right now, while we're mid-October or past mid-October, we're still in a really good period. And and when I say mid-September to mid-October, that's generally when soil temperatures and air temperatures are conducive. So once you move past that mid-October, as temperatures cool, what you see there is the overseeding will be slower to germinate and slower to establish, and that's going to be dictated more by environmental conditions than anything else. Not that it won't germinate, it's just going to be a little slower than, say, in that period where ideal conditions are favorable. Other consideration is spring transition. Know what you're going to do in the spring. How are we going to take that ryegrass out such that we can transition back to active growth of the Bermuda grass and try to get that Bermuda grass growing as quick as possible and provide that playing surface that your golfers desire. So you need to have a plan for spring transition, whether that's going to be a natural transition and you have time to naturally transition it, or whether it needs to be much more immediate, where you might integrate a herbicide transition aid So where you come in and you spray a herbicide, and within a short period of time, 7 to 10 days, the ryegrass is dead and the Bermuda grass is not having to compete for light, water, space, and nutrients, and the Bermuda grass recovery and growth resumes just as quick as possible. So have a plan for spring transition, and this is one of the things I tend to see folks fail on, is that they don't think about how they want to transition in the following spring. The impact on the Bermuda grass. What impact, or if you've got weak Bermuda grass, then I very much recommend not overseeding. You need a strong, healthy Bermuda grass stand if you're going to go into it, because competition during spring greenup. In the spring, the environmental conditions are going to be far more favorable for the cool season species. So it is out competing the Bermuda grass for, again, light, water, space, and nutrients. And many times a plant that we say is competing for light, water, space, and nutrients we refer to as a weed. Excuse me. So in the spring of the year, that ryegrass can be acting much like a weed would, in that it's competing for those resources that Bermuda grass needs. So that competition be quite strong in the spring of the year, when there's more favorable for the cool season species. You should expect a reduced turf grass quality. That Bermuda grass is not going to be as strong because it's had to compete, and it's just an unfavorable situation. So turf quality will be down, at least for a short period. If your Bermuda grass was healthy going into overseeding, that period that it's lower quality may be as few as little as a week. And there's been situations where I have seen some, and the slide right here shows it. This was a tee box on a golf course that was probably somewhere around 3 weeks after the transition of ryegrass. So you can see how little Bermuda grass was there. It was coming back, and it will come back. Bermuda grass is a hardy plant. It will come back, but if the competition is too great, it's just going to take it some time to come back. Obviously, core aeration would have helped this tee come in, core aerate it, open it up, let some warmer temperatures down into the root zone, warm it up, and initiate growth from those below ground rhizomes on it. So all things that you can do and think about in the spring to improve the Bermuda grass health, but and get it moving and growing in the spring and head towards as healthy of grass as you can on it. So and the other is fewer growing days, is the impact on Bermuda grass. So if you hold that ryegrass deep into the spring of the year, we like to say you need about 100 growing days a year for Bermuda grass, at least 100 growing days. So for us here in the southeastern United States, when you start considering tropical storms coming through and cloudy, overcast days, those kinds of things that aren't favorable for Bermuda grass, holding ryegrass deeper into the spring of the year starts taking days off of that 100, such that we can have a healthy Bermuda grass throughout the season, as well as maybe moving into the following fall of the year for subsequent overseeding. Where am I? Overseeding. Timing on this one. Things to think about. Residual herbicides. This is one of those things that you would think, oh, I shouldn't have to mention, but you'd be surprised. Folks would go out sometimes, they'll make a herbicide application for winter annual weed control, and then they may decide after that they want to overseed. So when was that last herbicide application made? What was applied in the last 30, 60, or 90 days on it? Check your label on some of these. But if you put out a herbicide, say in 1st of August, and you're looking to drop seed somewhere around the middle of September, then you may have an inhibition of germination, or actually a killing of the plant within that 45-day period, depending on what you applied, what rate you applied, and how far out. So be very cognizant of any residual herbicide or carryover with it. Textbook, we like to say temperatures greater than 21°C out there, and nighttime temperatures above 10°C is kind of the time to be overseeding. Cool season grasses like to grow in that range of 10 to 18°C. So when temperatures are above, say, greater than 21, daytime temperatures are there, that just gets that rapid germination but you'd like to have those nighttime temperatures getting down such that we're not just too hot for the ryegrass or that cool season species as it's beginning growing. So that generally happens in the fall of the year. You may start off a little warm at the first part of it, but over the course of germination and starting to root and take over, nighttime temperatures are cooling, daytime temperatures are subsiding as well, and we're moving into the time of the year where much more conducive for the cool season species. We did a study, and we'll talk the next couple minutes about some work that we did last year, where we actually overseeded with 4 different grasses, and we did it at 5 different timings. Our first timing was supposed to be mid-September, but we had Hurricane Irma come through, so she delayed that particular weather event, delayed our overseeding till first part of October, so it delayed us by about 14 days on it. So we had a 1st of October, which is this red area here, and I'll come back and explain these in greater detail here in a minute. And then we seeded mid-October, seeded mid-November, mid-December, and then mid-January for us. And you have the soil temperatures on the left, and I gave a relative comparison over on the right-hand side of where those soil temperatures were. So these are daily minimum, daily maximum, and 2-inch soil temperatures. And the reason I went with 2-inch soil temperatures is because the seed's right there at the soil surface. Many times we talk about a 4-inch or a 10-centimeter soil temperature on it for root growth and that kind of thing. But that 5-centimeter soil temperature is closer to the soil surface, and that's going to have a greater influence on initial germination of our overseeding species. So that early October, I looked at whenever the soil temperature was above 65, or was it about 18 C on it, and we had 18 occurrences where either the daily minimum, the daily maximum, or our 5-centimeter soil temperature was above that 18 C period. So we had 18 occurrences there, and we'll show you some germination data here in a few minutes. Our mid-October, if you will notice that our daily minimum temperatures fell way off by the middle of October for us last year. This would have been fall of 17, but our soil temperatures and our daily highs, we had 14 occurrences where we were over that 18 C period on those. In November, we only had 4, and all those were associated with daily highs. In December, we had 2, and in January, we had 1, just 1 occurrence where a daily high reached above 18 C in January, so that would have been of 18 of this year. Certainly want to keep in this slide in your mind right here, the December and January, where in December we had 2 days over 18 C and January over 1. And I'll show you some pictures of the difference between the germination on those, even though there was just 1 day difference, and it was less here in a minute. So tracked how many days we had, and then the rate to establishment and overall establishment and quality of our ryegrass. So looking at 30 days after seeding on these, so our early October, mid-November, mid-December, mid-January, and then our percent cover on these. And each one of these bars, the blue bar is perennial ryegrass called Carly. And the reason we used it is because it was promoted as having the ability to germinate under cooler conditions. Likewise, New Sealand, not New Zealand, the country, but New Sealand, S-E-A-L-A-N-D, is the red bar. The green bar is another perennial ryegrass, that is Silver Sun. So Carly, New Sealand, and Silver Sun are all perennial ryegrasses. And then Gulf, the purple bar, is actually an annual ryegrass. And generally with the case, annual ryegrass was always the first one to germinate and to come through, generally by just a couple of 2 or 3 days. And then the perennial ryegrasses germinated, day or two or three later. So early October, where we had more days above 18C, within 30 days, we were somewhere north of or above 85% cover. Mid-October, 30 days, so when we seeded mid-October, so these ratings will be equivalent to then rating in mid-November. So we had fewer days where temperatures were as warm for germination above that, and but we still had very good germination and cover greater than 80% for all cultivars and grasses. So our mid-November seeding, so when we seeded mid-November, 30 days after that's where these data would come from. So this would have been rated in mid-December on those. The Carly and the New Zealand did do very well as far as it goes with germination under a little bit cooler conditions. And then, excuse me, we get to mid-December. And remember I showed you that we had 2 days where soil temperatures were, or excuse me, the daily highs were over 18. And we had Carly and Silver Sun 30 days after those were seeded mid-December, either at or above 60% surface cover on those. And then in mid-January, and what's interesting here is all grasses did better in mid-January, only with one more day above 18C. I'll show you a picture here in a minute. So that to give you a sense right there as to where you can be in the impact of some soil temperatures and even some of these cultivars. So some cultivars are going to do better under cooler conditions, and sure enough, Carly did well under cool condition in December and in January on those. At Silver Sun, not too bad either there for the December germination. So give a sense as to what our plots look like on these. This was 5 days after seeded, and this was the initial seeding in on the 4th of, excuse me, it was seeded on the 4th of October last year. So we had perennial ryegrass, and I don't remember which cultivars these are, but that was a perennial ryegrass. This was a perennial ryegrass. You see the annual ryegrass there, a little bit taller. As I said, it comes on out of the ground a little bit quicker. And like I said, this is within 5 days of seeding, and this is another one of the perennial ryegrasses here, replicated, and you see the remnants of some of the rain that we've gotten from the hurricane, leaving some chaff and debris on the plots after this as well. So on it. Showing those data, you were seeing that cover with the mid-December seeding date was different than that of the January, and we had 3 replications in this study. So, excuse me, 4 replications, and this replicated out on all 4. So this was no anomaly here whatsoever. But in the foreground portion of this, you see our 4 plots. So this would have been the annual ryegrass. This is one of the perennial ryegrasses, one of the perennial ryegrasses, one of the perennial ryegrasses, and in the large plot area right behind it was the mid-January. And you can see the difference in cover on those plots. The mid-January in all 4 replications outperformed the mid-December. And I think what happens there for us is by de-seeding that late mid-December, although only one more day of above 18C, what we didn't have was the time and period that it was cold. So seeding mid-January for us, we start warming up, say somewhere end of January, 1st of February, and so as we move into that period, those seedlings are able to take off, and they've got a little bit more vigor because they weren't potentially lost from cold injury or even desiccation, although we kept our plots well watered for germination purposes. But we just weren't as cold as long on those seedlings in mid-January, and as a result, they came on, established faster, grew quicker, and were not near as stunted as the mid-December seeding. So even for us, there's a period in there where you can seed, you can get germination, but it's going to be delayed and it's going to be compromised by seeding too late. So although I think most folks, if they haven't gotten seed out by first to middle of December or November, they're probably not going to do an awful lot of seeding anyway. Let me make an adjustment on slides over there, and then here. So success to seedbed preparation is, well, there's several keys to success for overseeding. One is healthy Bermuda grass. Having good healthy Bermuda grass going into overseeding will certainly make a difference as far as it goes with overall overseeding success. The other is seedbed preparation. The key is soil to seed contact. You need to get that seed down to the soil, and opening that soil up is absolutely key on it. And many times folks are nowhere near as aggressive as they need to be. Opening that canopy up such that that seed falls down through the Bermuda grass canopy down to the soil surface, and that seed is actually sitting on the soil surface, not up within the canopy or above the thatch. So ideally you'd like to see some low mowing, blow and vacuum. You want to clean out that debris and chaff as much as possible, and allow that seed, whenever you seed it, to actually fall down through the canopy and hold it down in. Sometimes we see top dressing, so we'll seed and you come back in and you'll top dress over the top of it. You want a good quality sand. You don't want a dirty sand that's bringing in weeds and that kind of thing and go along with it. And you want to hold some moisture. That top dressing will help hold moisture right there at that seedling. So my top picture right there, you see this is a site prep that we did for another study, not the one we talked about, but another overseeding study. And you see how much green leaf tissue we removed. The perimeter of this is all Bermuda grass around the perimeter. And this inside here was Bermuda grass, but we scalped it, we blew it, we vacuumed it, we came in and mowed it again and blew it off and vacuumed it a second time. So we were real aggressive with this canopy, taking this down such that when we open it up, we allow that ryegrass to drop down through the canopy down to the soil surface, and we've got good soil to seed contact on it. And down here in the lower picture is an example of what I commonly see. Most superintendents don't have the ability to shut down the golf course for maybe, say, 14 to 21 days and get extremely aggressive with their Bermuda grass with the intent of having a strong overseeding appearance. More often than not, I see a light scalping. There's still some green Bermuda grass within the canopy, and then they do the best they can to work the seed down through the canopy down to the soil surface. But in this bottom photograph, as you see right there, that's mostly all Bermuda grass. There's little to no soil that you see, so soil to seed contact is not occurring in this bottom photograph, and that's commonly what I see out there. And I understand and get where you have to find a happy medium or a balance between aggressive Bermuda grass canopy preparation or site preparation and something that you can get back on relatively quickly. This here is an example of kind of what you want to get towards on it. Here I have a little bit of data on the size of different species, annual ryegrass and perennial ryegrass, the number of seed per gram that you might would have, and then the seeding rates that you might want to shoot for. So 39 to 49 grams of seed per square meter, or 393 to 504 kilograms per of seed per hectare for perennial or for annual ryegrass, and similar for perennial ryegrass. On those, there's a few more seed per gram on those, a little bit smaller seed relative to annual on it. The picture on the bottom, that's a multi-use football, soccer fields, track here in Georgia, in the U.S. And you can see how striking and stunning ryegrass, and this is perennial ryegrass here, can be. Annual ryegrass will never give you that dark green color. Annual ryegrass will be a lighter green color to it, more of a yellow green to it. It's not going to mow out and stripe up near as attractive as the perennial ryegrass will. So getting those striping patterns, that wow factor that tends to be a real marketing tool out there, you're not going to achieve that near to the degree with annual ryegrass as you will with perennial. Likewise, as much ryegrass as you see in that canopy right there, that's an example of what you can get when you get very aggressive with your seed bed preparation on it. So you get aggressive, you get that ryegrass down, you get a good healthy ryegrass, and this is the kind of results that you can expect in, say, January, February, March, April kind of period, or even into May. You can have these kind of looks and appearances from ryegrass. So again, very striking, very stunning, give you that wow factor, but the Sunday morning coming down, or the recovery from the weekend is a matter of what are you doing that Bermuda grass health out there. Poa trivialis is another grass species that's sometimes used for overseeding as a temporary cover. So I've got you some data there on this much smaller seed. So 5,500 seed per gram. The seeding rate, because of this number of seed goes down per pound, is less than that of the ryegrasses. There are occasions where we see Kentucky bluegrass or Poa pratensis is seeded, and even smaller seeds still there with or about the same size seed on it. Because Kentucky bluegrass is a perennial species, we tend not to see that one used because overseeding is used as a temporary color or cover. So that's not one we commonly see, but every now and then I have come across situations where Poa pratensis has been used as an overseeding material. Very rare on it. And then, of course, there's some intermediate ryegrasses out there that are similar to annual and perennial. Although the ones that I have evaluated in my program and on my research trials, I would say the intermediate ryegrasses are much closer to annual ryegrass than they are perennial. And at this point, if I'm looking for a high quality grass and situation, I'm going towards the perennial. The perennial, I think, especially on golf courses and with the desires that's out there or the pressures to perform, perennial ryegrass is going to be the grass of species on those. Distribution is critical. And let me make an adjustment here. Distribution is absolutely critical. I'd recommend uniformity. Try to get it as uniformly applied out there as at all possible. Split the rate. So if you're going to apply, let's say 10 pounds, and forgive me for not having the metric in my head on that one, but at 10 pounds of seed per 1,000 square foot, I would calibrate my spreader for 5 pounds of seed per 1,000 square foot and go over it in 2 directions. 90 degrees to each other is generally recommended on that one. This is kind of some things that happen when you don't get uniform distribution. Obviously, this is on a sports field, American football here, with somebody that didn't know what they were doing, using a drop spreader on it, and you see the skips, and they decide to go all in one direction right here. There is no, if they had cut the rate in half and gone 2 ways, we would have reduced some of these skips, and it wouldn't be quite as evident on it. It looks to me too like they probably started their seeding process in the middle, working out as they run out of seed back here towards this side. Either that or they started here and didn't quite have things going well, and then the seed started dropping this direction on it. So poor coverage is certainly part of it, and splitting that rate and going 2 ways is of tremendous value of reducing the likelihood of having these types of mistakes and errors out there. Multiple types of spreaders. There's the old drop spreader, and me in my younger days when I still had hair on it. Rotary spreaders. So if you're doing small areas around greens and that kind of thing, rotary spreaders, and you still want to calibrate those and try to go in multiple directions, even if you are getting more of a distributed pattern as opposed to a drop pattern on those. Or the old, oh, that didn't work like it was supposed to. The old tail wagger, if you're driving and doing fairways, same kind of thing there, is that, excuse me, that you want the even distribution as much as possible on those. Back to talk about annual and ryegrass a little bit, or annual and perennial ryegrass a little bit. The distribution, uniform distribution, goes regardless of a species that you choose to use. Annual ryegrass, lower turf quality, more of a coarse textured. It can work as a temporary cover, so if you've got an area that's bare soil and you need to stabilize that soil until you can get grass on it in the spring of the year when it's more conducive for root growth, annual ryegrass works there. On golf courses, I would not suggest annual ryegrass. Perennial ryegrass here in the South, we treat it, or in the southeastern United States, we treat it as an annual. We don't treat it as a perennial, so the name is a bit misnomer. In more northern climates, it will certainly perennialize and it will live from season to season, but we don't treat it that way here where I live, and we certainly don't treat it that way as an overseeding species. So we're going to put it out there, we'll let it seed it in the fall, we'll let it do its thing through the winter and spring, and then we want it to die off, or we're going to help kill it off in the spring of the year, such that it's truly an annual. It has improved turf qualities, darker green texture, finer leaf darker green color, finer leaf texture, as well as mowing appearance on it. Perennial ryegrass, whenever it's mowed, you mow it on Monday, it's going to grow uniformly. So even as you move into, say, Wednesday or Thursday, you've gotten some growth on the grass, but it's all uniform and it doesn't look as if it's unkept or unthrifty. Whereas annual ryegrass, it has more of a ununiform or a growth habit to it. So you'll have some leaves that grow short, and some that grow tall, and some will grow in between. So you mow it on Monday, it looks fine. You come back Wednesday or Thursday, and you've got some tall grass, some intermediate grass, and some shorter grass, and it doesn't look as well kept. And you compromise quality and appearance, and sometimes your reputation for that. So if I'm selecting a ryegrass species for golf course purposes where quality matters, quality counts, perennial ryegrass is the one that's going to give you the color, it's going to give you that striping, it's going to give you an even growth habit to it, and the breeding on those has come along really well, such that it has improved heat tolerance and disease resistance as well. Some other characteristics of annual ryegrass: light green color, rapid growth, as I just touched on. It is a quick germinator, I mentioned that earlier, and it has poor heat tolerance, which can be an advantage, which means it dies out quicker whenever it starts to warm up in the spring of the year. Here's an example of perennial ryegrass on the right-hand side, next to annual ryegrass on the left-hand side. These are not two pictures put together. This is one picture. I've come in and just separated where the area is. You see where some of the annual ryegrass has migrated over into the perennial, but you see the darker perennial on the right of and finer leaf texture, as opposed to the annual ryegrass, more of a medium to coarse textured leaf. And again, they are all mowed at the same time, and this over here looks less uniform, less thrifty, less attractive than the perennial ryegrass over on the right with it. Back and forth, sorry about that. Okay, we're getting close. So characteristics of perennial ryegrass: dark green color, quick germination. So in some of my trials, you may see perennial ryegrass be delayed behind annual grass day, 2 days. Again, soil temperature is going to drive much of that, and it will catch up relatively quickly. But if you put the two of them just in a good old foot race, annual ryegrass will germinate faster than perennial ryegrass, and it will you'll see it a day, 2 days, 3 days coming out of the ground quicker. So quick germination for perennial, but it's not as quick as annual. Excellent wear tolerance. It can withstand wear and traffic better than annual will. As I said, we treat it as an annual. It's an excellent species for golf and sports fields. And as I mentioned earlier, some of our breeders have done a very good job with improving heat tolerance in it, such that it can tolerate warmer temperatures as we move into the spring. So we get a day where it starts to get above 20 C. Annual ryegrass will start to show heat stress, whereas many of our newer perennial ryegrasses will do just fine on this. Mowing, and I don't go into great detail on a separate slide here, other than saying during the overseeding process, what I commonly see now is that the first mowing generally occurs with a rotary mower. that what we find is even if your bedding knives and your reels are sharp and well adjusted, those tender young seedlings can be ripped and pulled out, and we lose stand density. Whereas if we let them come up, we make that first cutting with a sharp rotary mower, we have less of that ripping and tearing and pulling out of those small seedlings, and we maintain a stronger canopy density. So the first mowing or two, once that ryegrass gets up, is being done with a rotary mower more so than a reel type mower. So that may occur somewhere around, say, 10, 14, 20 days after germination. You may get 1 or 2 mowings on it with a rotary mower, and then transition over to the reel type mower, where we've now established a root system. The roots are going to be there to help hold that seedling in. We're probably even already at, say, a 2 or 3 leaf stage on the plant. So at that point, we can transition over into a reel type mower and not run the risk of reducing our stand density. So as I said, the trend tends to be right now where I see the overseeding happening is the first mowing or 2 actually occur with a rotary mower to maintain greater stand density within the canopy. Keys to success, as I mentioned earlier: Bermuda grass health, site preparation, I've talked about those. Species selection, I've talked about the annual and perennial ryegrasses. So again, in golf courses where quality matters, that perennial ryegrasses will probably be a better one, and there's many cultivars out there. I mentioned 4 earlier. Those work well for me. There's others that I have seen and look equally as good. So you might want to do a little local testing. Some of those may perform differently in Spain, where you may have some different pressures either from soil or soil chemistry or pH, or even if you're in some coastal areas, maybe some salt spray. So there may be some cultivars of perennial ryegrass that handle salt stress better than others, and that's not a real issue for me where I am. Seedling rate, we mentioned earlier about that, is, well, excuse me, I mentioned it, but I didn't go into detail. I probably should have. Seeding rate is very critical. If you're heading towards something other like that sports field I showed, or many times I see golf courses somewhere in the, say, 10 to 12 pounds, and I'm sorry, I'd have to go do the metric conversion, but 10 to 12 pounds of seed per 1,000 square foot on it. If you just need a little bit of color, you can drop down to as little as 8 pounds of seed, and that gives you what I consider the windshield test. So it looks good as you drive by, but it has fewer seed out, so the competition for the Bermuda grass in the spring of the year is less. So if we can go with a lower seeding rate, say 8 to 10 pounds of seed per 1,000 square foot, we have less competition on that Bermuda grass, and we have a stronger transition in the spring and a stronger Bermuda grass during the growing season on it. So try to take your seeding rates as low as you possibly can. I'm certainly aware of some people going out there to, say, 15 to 20 pound seeding rates. While that can look really good during the winter and spring, the downside is how is it going to affect the Bermuda grass in the spring of the year when it's transitioning back out. So take your seeding rates as low as you can, go as little as you can on those. And the other key is transition. What can we do to transition, and how do we transition that ryegrass out in the spring of the year? So again, I will transition over here, or flop over here. So we have 2 different types of transitions. One's a natural transition, where we allow heat and humidity to dictate and drive more poor environmental conditions that ryegrass is not capable of maintaining, and as a result it will kind of die out on its own. We can speed that up with some cultural practices, so things like corification, verticutting on it, and as well as increasing our fertility, nitrogen fertility, and irrigation. Believe it or not, part of that natural transition can be increasing your irrigation, increasing your nitrogen, something like just good old urea, and you start getting more disease and allow the disease to naturally take out the ryegrass. So where you're fighting disease a large part of the year, you can actually use particularly Pythium and Rhizoctonia to be your friend and help take out that ryegrass and have a little effect on the Bermuda grass as it's transitioning in the spring of the year. So those are kind of aspects of a natural transition. The chemical transition is one of those things that you can choose whether you want to do that quick or slow. And some examples down here I have are some trade names of herbicides that we use as transition aids, and I have those listed in kind of speed order. So curb is one that can be very slow in transition if you go out and spray curb. All of these will be air temperature dependent, but curb may take anywhere from 21 to 28 days to kill off the ryegrass. So if you go spray curb May 1, you can expect that ryegrass to be dead somewhere latter part of May, 1st of June. Whereas if you use Manor, Monument, Revolver, Transit, or Katana, that could be anywhere from as little as, with Katana, say somewhere in 7 to 10 days, Manor, say somewhere in around about 14 to 20 days, a type of activity on those. So Manor may take 14 to 21 days to kill off the ryegrass. Monument and Revolvers could be right around that 10 to 14 day period. Transits could be right around that 7 to 10, and Katanas could be right around that 7 to 10 day kind of transition period. So nice thing about those is you're able to choose, all right, I've got this moment now where I can come in, kill it off. Air temperatures are going to be there, and the warmer they are, the faster they act. We have some folks out there, some superintendents, they may spray Monument in let's just say mid-April, when it's still too cool. Ryegrass is dead, it just doesn't know it yet, and whenever the air temperatures warm up, the ryegrass goes ahead and dies out pretty rapidly. I'm aware of some people have actually sprayed Monument, Revolver, Transit, Katana in March, and then not actually see the loss of the ryegrass until sometime in May. But that's when they had their opportunity to spray it. The ryegrass is there, it's green, it's just not growing much. It kind of almost acts as a growth regulator. And then when air temperatures get nice and warm, bang, the ryegrass goes out pretty quick on it. So transitioning is something to think about there on it. Fertility, we got to talk about fertilizing that ryegrass, because we're going to mow it while it's growing. We're also going to fertilize it and feed it while it's growing out there. 9.8 or 10 to 20 grams of nitrogen per square meter. Generally, you need to wind up having something that contains IDBU, isobutylene, IBDU. Yes, I do have it right there. I said it wrong. IBDU, isobutylene diurea. And the reason we use that one is hydrolysis. Many of our other slow-release fertilizers are temperature-driven or rely on soil microbes. Well, when soil temperature is cool, we're not getting that breakdown. So we need a material out there like IBDU that is more driven by hydrolysis, by moisture, and release that nitrogen as a result of hydrolysis. So you need to make sure you're containing some of your nitrogen in a form, and that is a slow release on it. 6 grams of nitrogen per square meter, so we're somewhere right around it. Potassium is always good to have out there on it. So, a good example for overseeding would be something like an 18-1-18 as far as it goes with analysis. But as you know, we can do an awful lot with any analysis. It's the rate that matters. So coming back in with something about 6 grams of nitrogen per square meter, considering you have a IDB, a little slow release in there, you can increase that rate some. And just a couple of 3 or 4 feedings a year, so maybe 2 in the fall, 2 in the spring, and will be all you need for that. And of course, you are providing a little bit of nitrogen there and fertility there for that Bermuda grass as it starts to warm up in the spring on it. With that, that's what I have. Talk about some practices that we see, some how-tos a little bit, some things to think about, as well as looking at some data from trial and research we did last year. And Xavi, if we have an opportunity, I'll be happy to take some questions. Obviously, I'll need some translation for that.
Hi, hello, Clint. Thank you very much for your time and for your presentation. It was really interesting. Just because let's give, I'm going to ask you just one question, and let's give some time to the attendees to introduce their question in the in the box in the software. So these webinars in this season we have had 2 webinar series about colorants and overseeding. And after giving these 2 presentations, my question would be, in which conditions would you choose one of these options, overseeding or using colorants for golf courses with Bermuda grass? So
it quite honestly, with many of the colorants that are out there right now, many of those are very attractive, and we see those used very well and very effectively. If I had my choice, I'd rather head more towards a colorant, especially on putting greens. With these high density putting greens high density Bermuda grasses that we have now, like Tiff Eagle, Mini Verde, Champion, getting seed into those and getting those seeded such that they are nice and uniform and look good is extremely difficult, even with small seeded species like Poa trivialis.
yeah.
I'm even aware of some folks that have seeded putting greens with bent grass because of, again, a small seed. But the impact that it has on those greens and the transition that it has, if I have my choice, I'd go with a colorant or paint or pigment, whatever you want to call those. On those, it has less of a negative impact on the Bermuda grass. So if I got my choice, I'll go with a good colorant every time.
Okay, thank you. Let me say some words in Spanish. Bueno, aprovechar ahora para por si tenéis alguna pregunta, la introducís, ya sabéis, en el apartado de preguntas, y bueno, pues se las trasladaremos al profesor Clint Waltz. Solo recordaros, bueno, pues que de cara al mes de noviembre tenemos programado otro webinar con Jorge Croda. Como bien lo conocéis, es un superintendente que trabaja en Estados Unidos, es bien conocido por los aquí en España, porque ha hecho alguna presentación en el Congreso de la Asociación Española de Greenkeepers. Pero bueno, tendremos la oportunidad de hablar con él y dar una charla que será también interesante. El mes de noviembre es un mes complicado para organizar webinars. Hay mucha actividad, o sea que solo haremos un webinar el 22 de noviembre y después ya pasaremos al mes de diciembre, que bueno, tenemos como siempre programado dos más, el día 10 y 17. Si vais consultando la página web de www.campusdelcésped.com, pues iréis viendo actualizado el calendario de webinars que tenemos programados. De acuerdo. Bueno, veo que no hay preguntas. Bueno, pues entonces, si no tenéis ninguna duda al respecto, pues daremos por finalizada el webinar con el Dr. Clint Waltz. Clint, sorry. Okay, today you spoke crystal clear, so because there are no questions.
Okay.
So there is no doubt. Okay, so thank you again very much for your time and for your collaboration with Campus del Césped, and well, I hope that we can collaborate again in the near future. Thank you very much.
Yes, please let me know. I'll be happy to help with anything in the future.
Okay, so thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you.